Dustin shocked me because we were filming a scene. Sorry about that. My wine glass was sitting there and he was in such a hurry that it flew past my nose and hit the wall and shattered into many little pieces. She's won 3 Oscars, received more than 20 nominations, and has been called the greatest living actress of our time. But even Meryl Streep has her limits. Now at 76, Meryl Streep is no longer silent. After decades of working with some of Hollywood's biggest names, Meryl Streep finally reveals the 6 actors she hated working with the most. No more fake smiles or prepared answers. Meryl is straight up naming names. From oversized egos to on-set drama you've never heard of, these are the co-stars who got under her skin. You won't believe who made it to this list. Dustin Hoffman is at the top. In 1979, Kramer redefined courtroom drama, parenting, and the emotional aftermath of divorce. But behind the film's Oscar-winning brilliance was an unspoken war between 2 veteran actors. Meryl Streep, then a rising star, and Dustin Hoffman, a Hollywood titan, clashed, not only on screen but behind the scenes in ways that would reverberate for decades. Their performances were explosive, raw, vulnerable, and unforgettable. But what audiences didn't see was the tension, disrespect, and a series of deeply personal clashes that turned a promising artistic partnership into a cold war of silence. It started on day 1. Streep was new to film, still grieving the death of her fiancé, John Cazale, and trying to define herself in a profession that rarely had patience. Hoffman, immersed in his method, not only blurred the line between character and self, but broke it down. It was my first film and the first time I'd ever acted, and he just slapped me, Streep told the New York Times. You see, in the movie, that's over the top. That slap wasn't scripted, it wasn't rehearsed. Hoffman was trying to elicit a real emotional response, and it worked. The scene was unforgettable, but for Streep, the price was personal. And it wasn't the only time Hoffman used emotion as a weapon. According to journalist Michael Schulman's unauthorized biography, Her Again, Becoming Meryl Streep, Hoffman also whispered John Cazale into her ear just before filming a scene of her breaking down in court, a cruel attempt to exploit the fresh pain of her real-life loss. "Next time you do that, I really want you to let me know," Streep reportedly told Hoffman after he smashed a wine glass without warning, sending shards flying. Cinematographer Nestor Almendros captures this moment brilliantly. Meryl acts like a precise instrument, every gesture, every vocal rhythm carefully calculated. Dustin handles the scenes like jazz, unpredictable and chaotic. For Hoffman, improvisation is art. For Streep, it is recklessness masquerading as genius. Their philosophies clash at every level. Director Robert Benton was said to have been tasked with keeping the peace on set, constantly diffusing tensions. And while the result was one of the greatest performances in film history, earning both actors Oscars, the cost of the action was still there. Hoffman has never spoken publicly about the slap. He never acknowledged the incident involving the glasses. His last comment came years later at a BAFTA tribute. "I'm getting divorced. I was partying with drugs. It ruined everything. That's not an apology. It was a backdrop, perhaps even a silent excuse." For her part, Streep finally found closure. Decades later, reflecting on her experiences on the post-press tour, she reflected on the changes in the film industry. Those things are being adjusted at this point because people won't accept them anymore. That's a good thing. But perhaps the most surprising twist came in 2020. Appearing Friday night with Jonathan Ross, Streep softened her tone. "All is forgiven. I really like him. And I think he's a great actor. But man, I was so mad that day. It was the first public sign that Streep had completely moved on. Not that Hoffman deserved forgiveness, but that time has softened the rage, not erased the memory, not justified the action, but only quieted it. And yet the scar remains. Not just a footnote in Hollywood history, but a reminder of the mental toll women often silently endure in their pursuit of greatness. Hoffman never paid the price for his actions. He continued to work, earning praise and respect. Streep, meanwhile, turned her pain into a performance and became the gold standard of serious acting. Is their feud over? Publicly, yes, but they never worked together again. No reunions, no collaborations. That one haunting film alone leaves a legacy of what might have been. If only respect had been shown. Because for Meryl Streep, art is sacred, but so is consent. And Dustin Hoffman crossed that line. Second, Kevin Kline. Meryl Streep builds characters like cathedrals, layer by layer, brick by brick, with the reverence of a scholar and the sensitivity of a sculptor. She doesn't enter a role until she has lived it, understood its language, felt its historical pulse. Precision is not Streep's preference, it's a rule. So when Kevin Kline walked onto the set of Sophie's Choice in 1981 with his natural grace, improvisational rhythm and extraordinary talent, sparks didn't fly, they collided. Director Alan J. Pakula envisioned a dream pairing. Two classically trained actors steeped in the rigors of theater come together to tell a harrowing story about the Holocaust. Their on-screen chemistry is undeniable. Off-screen, there was a quiet clash of creative ideologies. Production designer George Jenkins once said Meryl built Sophie from the ground up. Every variation of voice and gesture came from months of historical research. Kevin seemed to discover Nathan through improvisation and instinct. For Streep, that instinct, however wonderful, felt out of place. She immersed herself in the pain of Holocaust survivors, even studying the Polish accent down to the smallest syllable. Kline, by contrast, flowed through rehearsals with an ease that, for Streep, bordered on carefree. The real breaking point came during one rehearsal when Kline reportedly remarked that her strong accent was so precise it was almost distracting. It wasn't a cruel remark, but for Streep, it cut deep. What you call a distraction, I call essential. She was supposed to have shot back. I'm not here to play Sophie, I'm here to be her. From that moment on, the line was drawn. What seemed like productive collaboration between equals turned out to be a balancing act of tolerance. On set, they were professional. Off set, they were polite, but that belief was never fully formed. In later press interviews, Kline recalled Streep's process in what some saw as a dismissive tone, calling Meryl's preparation academic. Great, but sometimes it misses the mark. Streep doesn't respond directly, she doesn't need to. Her silence, her refusal to mention him during awards season, and her strategic distance at industry events said it all. To her, the word academic wasn't a comment. It was a rejection of everything she believed serious acting should be. Years later, when asked about their work together, Streep chose her words precisely. Kevin is a great actor. We just have very different ways of getting to the truth. She never elaborated. She didn't need to. Those who knew her business knew the implications. And as anyone who has worked with her knows, Streep never forgets an insult, especially one that violates her artistic ethics. For her part, Kline has never publicly apologized or retracted his remarks. He probably didn't consider it a fight. Perhaps for him, it was simply two methods colliding in the chaos of creation. But for Streep, it was more than a collision. It was an intrusion into the sacred ground where preparation meets performance, where history meets humanity. Kline's improvisational instincts may have made some scenes pop, but they left Streep feeling exposed, unsupported, and ultimately belittled. They never worked together again. In the decades that followed, both actors chose their own paths. No public criticism, no tabloids. But the cool politeness between them was evident in interviews and red carpets. Streep, a consummate professional, kept her distance. Kline, equally composed, avoided mentioning Sophie's Choice unless prompted. Third, Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson, on the other hand, does not build characters. He delivers. He walks onto the set with the confidence of someone who understands that charisma is performance. He doesn't disappear into roles. He bends them to his side. And for Meryl Streep, it's not just a difference of style. It's a violation of artistic integrity. Jack represents everything Meryl thinks is wrong with the modern film world, according to casting director Juliet Taylor. who worked with both legends on separate projects. He's more interested in being Jack Nicholson than disappearing into characters. The conflict between them isn't theatrical, it's ideological. It all started in the 1980s when both actors were at the peak of their careers. Directors and studios dreamed of pairing them, but Streep, always a talented actress, hesitated. She reportedly turned down several high-profile scripts that would have cast her opposite Nicholson. The reason? A quiet but persistent skepticism about whether he would ever put story before character. That skepticism turned to unease when the two finally collaborated on Mike Nicholson's 1986 romantic comedy Heartburn. Streep had just lost her original co-star Mandy Patinkin, who was fired on day one, and was completely surprised when Nicholson took the role. In real life, Nicholson is charming but also ruthless. He flirts a lot. He teased. He established personal boundaries in a way that, while not explicitly scandalous, made Streep angry. Author Erin Carlson revealed in Queen Meryl that she had to fight him, noting that Nicholson's behavior quickly went from playful to insistent. On set, their styles clashed like oil and water. Streep brought months of emotional preparation. Nicholson brought instinct and improvisation. While they never openly argued, their scenes were cold, mechanical, lacking the trust that fueled their great chemistry. Streep reportedly confided to Nicholson that she felt he was uninterested in the work, only wanting attention. Years later, when asked about acting legends and public perception, she responded implicitly. Some critics are adamant that Santa Claus is their father with a beard, that he is actually a human being, that Jack Nicholson is Jack Nicholson. That is not just an observation. It's a scalpel. Streep is pointing to the cult of personality. The idea that acting alone can be genius without process, without preparation, without craft. Unsurprisingly, Nicholson is undaunted. He once called this method acting intellectual masturbation, mocking the very discipline on which Streep built her legacy. His tone is not angry. It's funny. Acting is like sex, he said in an interview with Rolling Stone magazine. You can't really talk about it without sounding like an idiot. Just do it. That to Streep says it all. Their second film together, 1987's Ironweed, was less intense, but no warmer either. Even though the film reunited them just a year later, their on-set relationship remained professionally distant. They showed up, they did their jobs well, but the creative magic that should have ignited between the three-time Oscar winners never did. Over the years, both actors maintained public diplomacy. No scathing interviews. There was no onstage conflict, just absence. Streep never praised him in speeches. Nicholson never mentioned her in his flashbacks. The feud, if it could be called that, never erupted, but it never healed either. No sign of reconciliation, no joint appearances, no warm thanks at awards shows. It's just a quiet, unspoken understanding. They'll never see things the same way. For Nicholson, acting is alchemy, a spontaneous burst of personal energy. With Streep, it's architecture, calm, deliberate, and precise. Both are true, and that's why they don't get along. Nicholson is now largely retired, a Hollywood recluse. Streep is still active, still giving exquisite performances, still preparing with the same intellectual fire. When asked about actors who value character over preparation, she doesn't name names. She doesn't have to. Because with Meryl Streep, some performances belong to history and some belong to legend. And Jack Nicholson, for all his charisma, never switched from the latter to the former. There is a craft, she once said. Even in their most successful moments, the best actors know what they are doing deep down. That's what separates performance from play. For her, that's the line. And Jack has never supported it. Thursday, Gwyneth Paltrow. For Meryl Streep, acting is a calling. A career is rooted in discipline, passion, and truth. It is not a red carpet show, a commercial deal, or a prearranged interview. It is sacred work, sacred. So when Gwyneth Paltrow burst onto the Hollywood scene in the late 90s, with her pedigree, poise, and uncanny ease, Streep didn't see a kindred spirit. She saw a warning sign. Streep once remarked that she was charming when she appeared on a panel discussion. But the allure isn't the point. It's not a taunt. For Streep, it's an accusation. The tension doesn't come from a single explosive moment. It doesn't come from backstage tantrums or loud arguments. No, this is a colder, more surgical affair. A quiet struggle defined not by insults, but by silence. When Paltrow won an Oscar for Shakespeare in Love in 1999, audible sighs were heard in some corners of the Dolby Theater, not because of the win, but because of what it seemed to symbolize. Meryl Streep gave a more technically demanding performance in One True Thing that year, and many in the industry assumed she would walk away with the statuette. Instead, she watched Paltrow sob throughout the speech, which Streep said probably said more about celebrity appeal than artistic merit. It felt like the Oscars were voting for the next fashion icon, not Best Actress, a longtime Academy member confessed. Streep was quiet behind the scenes, but her silence spoke volumes. She didn't publicly congratulate Paltrow. She didn't mention the win in interviews. And more notably, she avoided sharing about panels, events, or stages that Paltrow also attended. A few years later, in an interview with The Guardian, Streep was asked about the state of young Hollywood. Her answer was surgical. "I worry that we are entering an era where acting is confused with presence, where real work is eclipsed by the spotlight." Critics and insiders have read between the lines and seen a mirror image of Paltrow. Even Alec Baldwin, who has worked closely with both actresses, once joked, "Meryl knows the phone book, Gwyneth knows her feelings." The joke, delivered at a dinner party, struck a chord with both women. Streep reportedly responded with a wry smile. Paltrow did not. According to a former Miramax publicist, Paltrow was deeply hurt by what she found to be a silent rejection. The source said she always wanted Meryl's approval. Growing up, she heard her name mentioned in the same sentence as Meryl. But once she got close enough, she realized Meryl had no intention of passing the torch. For Streep, the issue isn't personal, it's philosophical. She sees Paltrow as part of a generation that values fame over looks, privilege over preparation. And it's not just acting. Paltrow's move into lifestyle branding and her infamous Goop empire has only deepened the chasm. It's like watching an actress turn into a scent, one of Streep's collaborators whispered during a roundtable discussion. Streep, however, never directly attacked her. That's not her way. Instead, she praised actresses like Cate Blanchett, Saoirse Ronan, and Florence Pugh, women who were known for playing their roles rather than dominating the headlines. When asked about Paltrow's performance in Proof, a film that was supposed to mark her return to serious drama, Streep deftly deflected. "I think the film has a strong intention. Not that the acting is great or that Gwyneth is good, but just that it's intention. As for Paltrow, she's been more vocal, though always masked by a diplomatic facade. Meryl is intimidating," she told Vogue in 2010. "She sets the standard for all of us. Whether she sees me that way, I don't know." She knew, and despite her attempts to expand the circle through social media compliments, press comments, even private notes, Streep kept her distance. A former assistant said she kept a few actors in her circle of friends. Gwyneth was never one of them. Sixth, Jeremy Irons. In the history of cinema, there have been few confrontations as intellectually intense as the one between Meryl Streep and Jeremy Irons. It wasn't a battle of egos or tabloid scandal. It was something deeper, an artistic clash between two masters of their craft, each unwilling to budge to the other's view of what authenticity in acting really meant. They were supposed to be a dream couple, both classically trained, both revered for their earnestness, both capable of turning a whisper into an earthquake on screen. But from the first rehearsal room together, the chemistry was intense. Jeremy sees the characters as beautiful objects to be polished and displayed, says renowned voice coach Tim Monick, who has worked closely with both actors on various occasions. Meryl approaches them as archaeological sites to be carefully excavated. That distinction between poetry and excavation informs the rhythms of their dynamic. Where Streep believes in digging deep into layers of emotional truth, Irons believes in control, clarity, and elegance. His acting is something aristocratic, hers is intimate, honest, and raw, and neither style has patience for the other. The tipping point came during a rehearsal for a period drama that never got made. One insider described the rehearsal room as a battleground of furrowed brows and suppressed sighs. At one point, Irons reportedly remarked during a break that Meryl's voice was perfect, but at other times it felt like she was auditioning for the role with the best technique, not the person. For Meryl, who was famous for her belief that technical detail was the gateway, not the distraction, to character truth, the comment was a slap in the face. According to another witness, her reaction was cool but measured. If you think emotional truth and detail are polar opposites, Jeremy, you're missing the point. You are performing in front of people, not for them. From that moment on, the atmosphere between them became cold. They avoided each other at events. Their agents quietly ensured they were never considered for the same cast. At a film festival roundtable, when asked which of her fellow actors she most admired, Streep praised actors who sacrificed their egos for the sake of the story, a remark many believed was aimed squarely at Irons. Jeremy, never one to back down from an intellectual debate, later told The Guardian that Meryl was absolutely incredible. But sometimes I feel like the technique can be very seductive. You start to marvel at the skill instead of getting lost in the character. And that, in many ways, shaped the rift between them. Not as a childish conflict, but as a philosophical divide. With Streep, Irons' method is emotionally cold. With Irons, hers is theatrical exaggeration disguised as deep emotion. What makes this feud particularly tragic, however, is its enormous potential. They can create magic, one director laments. But you can't build intimacy between actors who don't trust each other's intentions. As for Alec Baldwin, who worked with both stars at different times, he once said on his podcast, "Meryl wants truth, Jeremy wants control. They're both brilliant, but they just don't work together." Fourth, Alec Baldwin. In public, they laugh. On press tours, they dance around the tension. But behind the scenes of It's Complicated, Meryl Streep and Alec Baldwin weren't having it easy. Their on-screen chemistry was perfect. Their real-life collaboration was a bit erratic. For Meryl Streep, acting is architecture. Every role is meticulously crafted with every detail, voice, posture, breath, and intention. She approaches comedy like a surgeon, says script supervisor Diane Dreyer. Every laugh has to come naturally from the character. Alec Baldwin, he's a storm, quick, funny, instinctive, and impulsive. He's a natural. In 30 Rock, he could do a scene in one take, but Streep is not 30 Rock, and Baldwin's looseness clashed with her precision. "We kept trying to find the same rhythm," a crew member told Vanity Fair, but they were dancing to different rhythms. Meryl is Mozart. Alec is Miles Davis. The disagreement was evident in the rehearsals. Baldwin frequently deviated from the script, rewriting jokes, rephrasing lines, even rearranging gestures on set. Streep, who had worked out every emotional detail of her character down to the last breath, found herself sidetracked. Alec would change a line mid-sentence, and Meryl just blinked at him. "Like, really? Now?" a cameraman recalled. Her reaction was subtle but sharp. She asked for more rehearsal time, requested reshoots, and pushed for a restructure in scenes Baldwin had improvised that turned chaotic. What made it worse? Baldwin figured it was all part of the process. Working with her was a dream come true, he wrote on Instagram afterward. "She is beautiful. She is smart. She is funny." But insiders say that's Baldwin's charm as a cleaner. Streep was quite frustrated on set. Not that Baldwin wasn't talented. She had admired his work for years, but his unpredictable personality forced her to compromise. She had never criticized him publicly. It's not her style, but she couldn't hide her frustration. "You do the work," she once said in an interview. "You build your truth from within. The rest is just noise." To those who knew her, that was not a general comment. That's aimed at actors like Baldwin, who rely more on charisma than image, and Baldwin doesn't seem to mind. At a press conference promoting the film, he joked that she's a maverick, the Bette Davis of her generation. You can't walk onto a set without her knowing unless you want to get stared at. He said it as a compliment. Streep didn't laugh. Despite the disagreements, however, they made it work. It's Complicated was a success, both critically and commercially. But the collaboration was never repeated. No second films, no follow-up projects, just polite interviews and public praise. Nothing to hide the creative inconsistency. Was there discord? Not the classic attention-seeking kind. No shouting, no insults, no walkouts. But there was a professional chasm between them, built on radically different ideas about acting. For Baldwin, acting is play. For Streep, it is sacred labor. And for an actor who values structure, Baldwin's chaos is nothing new. It's confusing. They remain friendly in public. They pose for photos, compliment each other in interviews, and even joke around when the cameras are rolling. But in real life, Streep keeps her distance. Meryl acts like an orchestra, a member of the It's Complicated crew commented. If you're out of tune, she won't tell you, but you'll feel it. And Alec Baldwin? He still calls the experience a career highlight. Maybe not because it was easy, but because getting through it felt like an accomplishment. To this day, Streep has never asked Baldwin to co-star again, and she never will.